monster weaknesses, so we're probably looking for things that are just out of the ordinary creative or maybe very uncreative. So you guys are always welcome to join Discord for free, but we also have a cavern in the public Discord that is for patrons. One of the benefits you get for being a patron is that your share during these live shows gets shared first. The Wishmaster, they have almost all power in the universe and can do anything, but their biggest weakness is that they can't do anything for themselves directly. And it makes for a cool story. That's why I could see this work in movies. Essentially, and that's how she beats the Wishmaster in one of the movies, is she looks to the source where he was summoned, conjured, and she just wished that didn't happen. So it was done by a drunk guy. So she was like, I wish he wasn't drunk, because if that guy wouldn't have been drunk, he wouldn't have wished the Wishmaster into being. So that would have stopped him at the source. Because if he's existed for long enough, and oh, I have to find the source, you have to go through so much research to figure out who and where first summoned him. And that's a whole book or movie all by itself. So it's not a bad idea, but in the end, the whole genie thing, I want to wish for more wishes. There are things that can sometimes be broken there. So let me jump into mine. So from The Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch, she is somewhat accidentally killed. And how?
H2O.
So she has a bucket of water spilled on her, and then she just melts. That's it. But it's like an accident, and it's the bucket of water right there. And after all the power she has and who she is, that's the first one. So it's kind of like that milk with the trolls, but I feel the milk with the trolls makes even more sense. The trolls, I mean, it's milk. It has some properties to it. It might be holy because it's food for humans or something. So in this old lore, it can still work. It's funny because it's such a famous movie and story. I totally forgot that was her demise. Okay, another fun one. This one's pretty silly.
Oh. I don't know what you're talking about. I see absolutely no weaknesses here.
Okay, their weakness, stairs.
No.
Among them.
They can literally fly through space. They have self-propelled flight. They do not have problems with stairs. They essentially have capital ships, but they themselves function as fighter planes.
So
that's a hilarious one.
Not fully there, but that was still fun.
The one I selected doesn't really have a visual representation. It's the matter as the knowing the name of a monster giving you power over it. Like with demonic creatures or your type of more spiritual type of monster, which I find personally hilarious because it is the complete opposite of human beings. Yes, if you know the name of the leader of some shadowy organization, you could technically say that you have power and leverage over them, but your average run-of-the-mill Joe Schmo out on the street, he just tells you, oh, hi, my name's Joe Schmo, and you can't really do much with that. Meanwhile, you have these eldritch entities that try to hide their true names because if Joe Schmo knows and be like, you're my bitch now, give me a beer. And they'd have to obey. And I just find that discrepancy between the mortals and the horrors of the beyond quite amusing. Knowing the names of a monster giving you power and control over it.
This is one I saw in my research a lot, which is Killer Tomatoes. A song made them shrink. I don't know if I ever watched the movie completely, but it's a great little scene because they do shrink to regular sized tomatoes because they're these big ones that eat people. And then people just run around and smash them and step on them.
Yeah. LazyBot here on the server. All right, gonna toss in my pick here. My pick is the infamous weakness of asking for permission to enter a building for vampires that we briefly had mentioned in The Alchemist Tower. I love this so much because it plays so well into the classic mythology aspects of absurdism, and it helps to add depth to whatever it's used in. It definitely adds in an additional level of complexity that the vampires need to work at. Vampire needs permission? How cunning do they need to be? How does this play into a larger setting? Do vampire-aligned individuals put up signs saying, all are welcome? That is actually very clever. Do vampires now use human agents to go into buildings to spy? All kinds of great questions and aspects like these can be explored.
When I thought about it, I did think that it is kind of silly, but you can still build off of it quite a bit. And we've seen that in movies. They have to be cunning enough to figure out a way in.
As we have the glow-in-the-dark Gamza saying, here's a cool fact about xenomorphs. In one version of Alien 3, exorcisms would have worked on people impregnated with xenomorphs, and it would safely remove it. I don't think it's a silly weakness, but I kind of like it. It implies they were supernatural. This is quite the amusing monster weakness. It's another Dragon Ball character, and he is apparently physically hurt by insults.
Do you guys remember how the Mars Attacks aliens got defeated? It was just like a yodeling sounding singer song, and that just made their heads explode within their little domes there. It worked with the context of the movie. Mars Attacks was obviously not like a serious alien invasion movie. The whole premise, everything that happened, it's a really fun and great movie. A lot of fans of it. I think it's based from a comic book, but nonetheless, what destroyed them was a really horrid song that made their heads explode. Silly, goofy, yes, but it fit the context. This is, name the creature,
That's the Kappa.
Japanese mythology.
The river yokai spirit that it will grab you, drag you into the water to drown you, and it pulls your soul out through your bumhole.
It is this entity, and what it has on top of its head, it's not an official weakness, but it is a weakness mentioned. It has this pool of water on top of its head, and it gets weakened if it spills that water out from the top of its head. So I do like that one because that is a mythological creature. It's got some lore, age behind it, and then it's got this goofiness of spilling that water. So hey, well, that's why they don't exist anymore. You know why? Because Japan has had and does have earthquakes. So imagine how well the Kappa handles that. That one's one of my favorite today. Okay, next one. We got to shout this out. It's an obvious one for today's topic. Come on, killer clowns. Incredibly powerful entity. And so in the context, again, like Mars Attacks, it works because their weakness is their big red nose. You blow up that nose, they're dead. But otherwise, they're incredibly powerful. So kind of like Saiyans. Of course, we mentioned a lot the vampire, but the one I want to mention with the vampire, because I do have the vampire being invited into your house. Okay, we talked about that and diversity of that idea. But what I also like about the old vampire weaknesses is it can't cross running water. That's the one I find probably the most ridiculous.
Doubly so, considering they can technically fly and teleport. And it's
Exactly.
apparently a trait that is common to even other undead, not just the vampire, so it's very bizarre.
Yes, there's another creature that has that within the lore.
The Dullahan. However, with it, it's more
Yes.
understandable because the Dullahan is the source for the Headless Horsemen. They carry their heads in their arms. And the reason they don't cross running water is that if they drop their heads, it's going to get swept downstream. So you don't want to risk that.
Exactly. So it's a little bit more logical. But yeah, logic goes out the window with that one. I do like that one, and where and why that comes from. It's like maybe it's a lesson for kids not to get near rivers, or it might, take them away and they'll get hurt or drowned. But I don't think, that's the reason, the lesson learned. Why running water? It's an interesting one. It's a bit ridiculous. So I name it as one of the most ridiculous. It might even be biblical, but I'm not sure.
I only have glow in
we
the
do?
dark. Gams is saying, I wonder if they can't cross running waters because of lots of spirits travel and or gain power through running rivers, and it might take their soul or spirit away. Oh, and also Western vampires can drink red wine.
So my final one,
It's a very lovely image. Well, terrifying, but lovely from a entertainment point of view.
if you guys recall, the weakness of the aliens in War of the Worlds is basically bacteria or microorganisms. I believe it's sickness. It wasn't pollutions like in Signs. This relates to Signs, and I'll put Signs up real quick because I liked it in Signs too, that it's pollution, but I don't think it was.
Science was again just water.
I thought it was the pollutants in the water. It wasn't just the water, but because the water is so unclean, whether it's chlorine or whatever is in there, it affected the alien. Let's get some clarifications on the Signs. Because if it is just water, that is more silly. I do think microorganisms are better. Microorganisms and sickness. Because of the unseen threat and all that, and what we all deal with as a threat to us when we explore new worlds and realms. Even when we explored Earth, people would suffer and die from a lot of diseases they weren't used to encountering. That's one of the number one threats we consider when we explore other planets. Shout out to Alien Covenant, which ruined that, where the scientists are just like, oh, let's go around and smell this, touch that.
No wonder they were sent off to some bump nowhereville planet. They were the science division was trying to cull the weak and the useless. They were excising the infection from their organization.
It'd be kind of cooler in a kaiju movie because of what I'm thinking, but it's because you have this big threat that's maybe also physically big, but then it's destroyed by one of the smallest organisms. So this big organism taken over by a tiny one. I mean, science kind of took about that, but they could have been more creative and even, like I said, use pollution or something else. Some chemical, like the movie Evolution, they have a particular chemical that's in hairspray or something that they destroy the monster with. Cool, that works. There's a compound. But here it's water. It's like a very base.
And that also raises the question, why would you invade a planet whose 70% of the surface of which is covered in a thing that instantly kills you?
And not only that, but it's in the air. And where they live in that movie are farmlands, which are more humid than non-farmlands. Not pushing that idea, but there's still water in the air. So you're telling me as soon as it rains, they're screwed?
It's as if humans invading Venus without any protective gear.
So it's not silly as a biological concept, but it's silly in the context of these far-faring humanoid creatures.
From what we're able to see, the aliens from science were not biomechanical, so they weren't silica-based life forms, which would imply some kind of weakness to water. They were carbon-based creatures, which, fun fact, yes, we do have sugars in us, but we are not sugar people. We don't melt underwater.
Right. So for what we know of organisms in that context, it's silly, but I was saying, like, if it's another level of entity, like a more metaphysical, a spiritual kind of being, maybe different dimensional, coming from an area where water is scarce or rare or non-existent, and it's coming from a whole different realm, that could be very creative and very possible in the lore. That's fine, but these, like you said, they appear more carbon-based. They're working with our physics. So the way it was presented, it wouldn't work with that kind of alien life form. It would really have to be much more of an alien entity for that concept to kind of work with it.
We do have Raptor mentioning that the little girl in Signs mentions the water contaminated through the whole thing too. So
yes,
who knows, maybe there is some.
Yes, exactly, because she kept putting glasses aside. So what she does throughout the movie is she sets aside glasses of water that her dad gives her because she says, this one is contaminated, because she learned that word from somewhere. I think it's that kind of, kid situation. So she's all using this big word in her vocabulary, but she puts all these glasses aside with water on the fireplace, not drinking those. And those are the waters that later he breaks with the baseball bat and hits the alien with. So they are those specific glasses of water.
Well, it does bear the question, was the water really contaminated, or was that just being a tiny child being pretentious?
That's a factor, but then I don't know why that would be so relevant in the movie, right? In the expression in the movie.
Oh boy, yeah. Apparently Lancer also heard a theory that it wasn't simply water that killed the aliens, but that they are a metaphor for demons, and that the water was blessed by the priest from years ago.
Oh, that's fine, but we didn't see that so much. I am going to wrap up with that. Chris, if you want to read that last Discord share, and I'll get the shout out ready.
I love ID4. It's one of my favorite alien invasion movies, but it took me many years to realize that it did to an alternate take of War of the Worlds. Instead of it being biological viruses that kill the aliens, it's computer viruses that wreck their fleet. The concept of computer viruses and firewalls do not exist in that alien's culture. Oh boy, they must be getting a lot of spam messages then.
Okay, let's shout out some of the best people in this little universe we have.
Our phenomenal patrons that are helping to support the World of Monsters channel and the Monsterite community. We deeply thank you for your generosity and hope to continue providing you with both excellent entertainment and benefits that you can make use of.
So a huge shout out to Tammy Osborne, Rita Miller, Jill Leberzieux that just joined a few weeks ago, and then our latest Cytoracoraptor. Thank you guys for the support.
And I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day and a pleasant evening. Good night.
Take care, everybody. Stay monstrous, as always.